Hello everyone, my name is Philip Jacober, and the poem that I will be reading to you today is called The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. This is a narrative poem, and I'm going to be reading the whole poem from start to finish, and then going back and focusing on a few specific lines to conclude what the overall meaning of this poem is. So, the first thing I like to do is give you some background information about Robert Frost. First off, Frost was born March 26, 1874, and died in 1963. He is one of the most celebrated and popular poets in America. He has received a number of awards throughout his life, and 4 of those include Pulitzer Prizes, and those he won for his poetry. Another main fact about Frost is that he was an English professor at Amherst College, which is in Massachusetts, and one of the things he did there was he encouraged his students to take their voices into account when writing. In other words, he wanted them to listen to their own instincts when they write and not follow anybody else's examples. One last important fact about Frost is that his poems often contained portrayals of rural life in New England and offered philosophical as well as social insight. So next, I'm going to give you guys I'm going to give you a couple of reasons why I chose this piece. The first reason I chose this is because it is a very interesting poem. It's that great that if one were to read it, they would want to keep on reading and maybe read it more than once. The other reason I chose to talk about this specific poem is because it gives a lot of great detail, even though it's very short. So in other words, Frost is being very concise here when he writes his poem. There are a couple of things that are unique about this poem that I'm going to tell you. And the first thing is, anyone who reads it right away can understand the meaning of the poem, and they will be able to relate to the poem. The other reason I chose this specific poem is because it's very rhythmic and it has a secondary meaning. So basically, he's not literally traveling down a road. He's making a decision in life, which I will get to. And anyways, this poem again is called "The Road Not Taken," and I'm going to read the poem, and then once I read it, I'm going to tell you what the poem means by focusing on more specific lines, and then concluding the overall meaning. So, 2 roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood, and looked down as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. So, what Frost is trying to tell us is that when he said he's proud of himself for making the right decision in life and for choosing the right choices to help him lead up to it, and when he says "I" twice, he's emphasizing that he was the one who chose to do this, and he's proud of himself for doing that. And what he's doing is he's really choosing wisely on what decisions he can make, and he can't make more than one decision. He's got to really think through the decisions and think about the rewards and consequences for each one, okay? And at the beginning, when he said, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler, that's where that comes into play. He can't make more than one decision. That's when he has to narrow it down and think about the benefits and drawbacks. So, in conclusion, Robert Frost is a very famous poet and very popular in America, and he writes poems that talk about his life, and he's basically teaching a life lesson because he wants those who read his poem to relate in some way to his life, and he wants everyone, just like him, to think about what's good and what's bad, and really think things through before you make your decisions. And then once you have started to narrow them down, then go ahead and choose what pathway you want to take. And the reason why this poem is called "The Road Not Taken" again is because he is making a lifelong decision that could have a positive impact on his life, and he's not literally driving down a road. So one more thing before I before I stop is I'm going to tell you what I did one more time. So the first thing I did after introducing the name of the poem and the author, I gave some credibility about Robert Frost so that you can get a little bit of a background of what kind of person he is. And then I went into why I chose this book, or why I chose this poem, and what's unique about it. And then I went on to read the poem and tell you what the poem means and how he wants you to relate yourself to the poem, and why the poem is called "The Road Not Taken." Again, I'm Philip Jacober, and thank you for listening.